Monday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Hope you had a great weekend. Thanks for joining us. If you're a huge Browns fan, it probably was not a great weekend. Browns eliminated by the Texans in what turned out to be a blowout loss in Houston. Kevin Stefanski's reaction to that playoff loss.
It's very abrupt when the season ends, and all our guys really put in so much work, and to not be playing any more games, that's tough. That's hard for our guys and hard for us as coaches. So, that's the immediate emotions and the first thing you think about when you wake up on a day like this. And then you also have to step back and express gratitude, because I am extremely grateful for this football team. They work like crazy. They did everything I asked them to do, really going all the way back to April. And they fought for each other. I think those are a bunch of guys that care about each other. And I think you saw that throughout this season. And just the things that they went through and kept coming back. So I'm really proud of this football team. Again, disappointed in how it ended, of course. Disappointed when it ends. But I don't want to lose sight of the accomplishments of this football team. And I give them a ton of credit for that.
With that, let's welcome in Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle Telegram, as well as BrownsZone.com. And Scott, they look like a beat-up team. They looked. I thought they had more talent. They looked outmanned.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's one game, right? I think just because they lost and got blown out, that happens in the league. Now, it doesn't mean they didn't play poorly. It doesn't mean they don't have flaws. They certainly do. I was surprised by how poorly the defense played in that first half. I just didn't see that coming. I thought Bobby Slowick, the hot Texans offensive coordinator, had a great scheme and got the Browns on a bunch of misdirection. And then I think the rest of it was things that if you're going into the game, you thought, oh man, I'm concerned if you're a Browns fan. I'm concerned that Flacco's going to turn the ball over. I'm concerned that the tackles can't protect long enough. And those two things wound up, if you add that to the defense, wind up being the backbreakers.
Yeah, without question. And I'm with you. The defense was disappointing. The thing that was kind of surprising, no real pressure on C.J. Stroud. Texans kind of moved up and down the field. Greg Newsome and Denzel Ward talked about the loss in the defense.
It's tough. I'm still trying to figure out how to move on from it. I mean, like I said, we definitely didn't want to be at this point. Wanted to move ahead in the playoffs. But don't want to discredit what we're able to do during the regular season. Guys did a great job, but just got to find a way to be better next season and find a way to be able to advance.
I think it's definitely on us. I feel like a lot of the plays, if you really watch the game, a lot of it was eye control, a lot of stuff like that. It wasn't really, their scheme just out-schemed us or just beat us. I just feel like we didn't hone in on the little details, and that's what we've been focusing on the whole time. When you get to the playoffs, the margin for error is even slimmer than the regular season. You could lose a game and go to the next game and continue to build, but in the playoffs, you don't have the opportunity to play a bad game or have a bad snap. So I think it was definitely things that we can correct.
Yeah, Scott, I don't know about you. I knew Stroud was good. I was just surprised that they didn't try to get after him a little bit more.
Yeah, I don't know if they didn't try, but they certainly didn't have any success doing it. They took Myles Garrett out of the game. Part of that was Laramie Tunsil. Part of it was double and triple teams. Part of it was they rolled away from him a bunch and the misdirection. And, Jim Schwartz's scheme, and we've talked about it, they were great all year long, or for, overall for the whole season, number one ranked in yardage. They're aggressive. They try to get up the field, and when you make them slow down with the misdirection, that has an impact. Now, if they're dealing, if they get a couple negative plays, which the Browns defense led the league in negative plays, then it's different. If it's 2nd and 15, right? It's 3rd and 12. Then it's a different spot. But it felt like the Texans were always ahead of things, always kind of controlling the tempo and the pace, and the Browns didn't have any answers. And a couple of times they came close to getting to Stroud, and he hung in there and delivered the ball. And those are difference-making plays, right? JOK hit him in the chest to one, and I think it turned into a touchdown. I think it was Taki came free on another one. He lofts it out on a swing pass and, picks up yardage. And if he hangs on for another second, it's a lost a yard. It's a negative play, and the Browns have some momentum. So he really handled everything. And I think, like I said, Slowick put him in a bunch of good positions, and the Browns were never able to fluster him or that Texans offense.
The other thing, and I know you wrote an article about this, Houston able to kind of hold Amari Cooper in check after, 265 when they played on Christmas Eve.
Yeah, you figured they had to do something drastically different, right? Because you can't let that happen again. You're going to lose. And, Cooper said he didn't think they did anything majorly different. Still played some zone. He said they played some soft coverage. But it felt like they took away some deep shots, which was, huge in Cooper getting to 265. Opens the game with, I think it was a 53-yarder on a post. 75-yard touchdown on a double move down the left side, right? Those are two huge plays. And if they're taking that away, then you have to go more methodical. You have to look somewhere else for your deep shots. And plus, they put Derek Stingley Jr. on him more. I don't know, the percentages, but he was on him more, which helped the Texans. And then Cooper wasn't the same. He hurt that heel early in that first Texans matchup and played through it, but hadn't played since, only practiced once since then. And, he had occasional bursts, but it didn't feel like he was the same guy. And I think all that contributed. So then you're left looking for other answers on offense. And, when the defense isn't doing anything, you figure you got to score every time. That makes it really difficult.
Yeah, Cooper looked hobbled after that early catch that he had as well. Kind of dragged his foot behind him and looked a little hobbled. All right, let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason for the first time today.
After that bee-slapping we took yesterday, I think you guys need to really consider how you think about Kevin Stefanski. The Browns were completely and totally unready for this game. They looked like a high school team out there. The players can only run the scheme you gave them. And the scheme that they were given was terrible. Whereas, on the other hand, Houston had a brilliant scheme. I mean, everything that we thought they were going to do, they did something else. This is that time when I keep telling you about Kevin Stefanski, when he lays that big, giant egg. It's in the bigger games. He's never going to get us past the first round of playoffs. I mean, that was ridiculous. We got blown away. I'll let you hear what you guys say. Thanks. Bye.
Couldn't disagree with you more. You're playing with your fourth and fifth tackles, who for really the first time all year look like your fourth and fifth tackles. Fourth quarterback, no Nick Chubb. I could go on. And as I say that, I'm surprised they made it to the playoffs with what they overcame. But they didn't play well. They just didn't.
Yeah, and I mean, it happens when you don't play well. And like you said, we picked a bad day to have a bad day. And it's crushing when it happens in the playoffs. And it might get Mike McCarthy fired in Dallas, right? Because it's happened multiple times. But I'll take issue with the caller on a few things. Number one, they went to the second round of the playoffs in 2020. So, I know Stefanski did not coach in that wild card game. I don't think the outcome would have been different if he was on the sideline instead of Mike Priefer. So I'm counting that as they got to the second round. I think one of the best things Stefanski and Schwartz do is their schemes and the game plans. Offensively, they scored 14 in the first half. They moved the ball. That wasn't the issue. The issue was the defense. And, that's a Jim Schwartz thing. I know Kevin Stefanski's in charge, but he leaves it up to Schwartz. And we can critique that all day long. But Schwartz was an upgrade. He made a vast improvement in this team. And it's a tough way to end. But the caller's going to have to get used to it because Kevin Stefanski's going to get an extension, and he's going to be here for years to come. And I agree with you, Dave. I think that's the right move. I think he showed so much this season, and I think he's continued to improve throughout his tenure as an overall head coach and as a play caller.
Yeah, again, just look at the quarterback situation, and he hasn't had, when he's had decent quarterback play, Baker Mayfield, Joe Flacco, he's gone to the playoffs.
Right. That's huge.
Quarterback play is everything in the NFL.
I mean, he won games, and it's so hard because you're focusing on the Houston loss, which is really tough to take, and then you're looking at the whole season, and the fact that they got to the playoffs, like you mentioned, was a minor miracle, right? And the fact that he won games with P.J. Walker, like that counts as a miracle. DTR was not ready to play at a high level, and he beat Pittsburgh with DTR. So, you can't just remove that from Kevin Stefanski. And guys didn't play well, right? And they got, You can say they got out-coached, but you have to look at more than one game, and you take the big picture view. He had guys ready, and he did a tremendous job.
All right, so along those lines, ESPN.com's offseason guide for every eliminated team. Biggest offseason priority. Cleveland should focus on extending Coach Kevin Stefanski. General Manager Andrew Berry needs to lock up the coaching staff and front office for the foreseeable future. Stefanski is 37-30 since taking over as coach in 2020. And again, the only season he had a healthy quarterback was the Baker Mayfield year in 2020. So I agree with them. And I'm assuming we'll hear about those extensions relatively soon.
Yeah, I would think they're coming within the next couple of weeks. Yeah, and they're deserved. Andrew Berry's is deserved. They have work to do in the offseason, obviously, especially from a roster standpoint. But he put together a team that got to the playoffs, and he did it with getting guys off the street and finding a way and building enough depth to start and then adding to that depth throughout the season. And, I keep coming back to this. It's hard. I get it. I get the emotion of the Saturday game. But people need to look at where this franchise was when they took over in 2020. They hadn't been to the playoffs since 2002. They hadn't had any continuity. There'd been no coach since Marty Schottenheimer that had gone to back-to-back playoffs. So this Kevin Stefanski feels like the right guy to me. I certainly know he's smart. Feels like the team was all in behind him this year. Like, those are all things you're looking for. You're looking for some stability. You're looking for some continuity. And there's no reason to not have that with these two guys.
All right, before we go to break, Browns did make some moves relative to the roster. So when they're eliminated, they can sign guys to the futures reserve contract. That's what they did today. Darden, wide receiver who's intriguing. Kelly just always seems to be there. Then some young defensive linemen, Lonnie Phelps, Isaiah Thomas, guys that kind of pique your interest with those. But again, those are futures reserve guys, some guys that are looking as developmental guys.
Yeah, all of them finished the year on the practice squad. Charlie Thomas, the linebacker, showed up in training camp, I thought, in the preseason. Had a little bit of time. I think he got elevated at least one time during the year. The tight end, Zaire Mitchell-Payton, he's a big dude. And last week at practice, I happened to, be watching him running routes, and I think he's gotten better catching the ball. Harrison Bryant is going to be a free agent. His rookie contract's up. I think Mitchell-Payton is probably more athletic than Bryant. He's a bigger guy. We'll see if he has a role. He's a guy on that list that intrigues me a little bit.
Scott Petrek, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as BrownsZone.com. And I gotta step aside, take a quick time out. Back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Ooh, holiday gold! The $20 scratch-off?
It has 100 times multiplier. I could win $1 million.
Psych! I got merry and bright.
No fair.
It has a 200 times multiplier. I could win $2 million!
Game on the back.
Game on the back.
Game on the back!
Game on the back! Game on the back! Game on the back!
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrek, Browns beat reporter from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as BrownsZone.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Defense was the strength of this team all season, but they completely got annihilated by C.J. Stroud. They let us down tremendously. And Flacco, once again, threw back-breaking pick sixes. I just hope that the Browns fans that were pounding the table to re-sign Flacco and trade Watson can now come to a realization that Flacco just wasn't the guy for us. It was an enjoyable ride while it lasted, but the clock struck midnight on his Cinderella story.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Scott, I don't know about you. I mean, when you look at it, I think Flacco, and rightly so, you looked at it and said, who can we get so we don't waste a year for Myles Garrett and Joel Bitonio and some of the veterans and turn this into, a potential run at the playoffs. Flacco was the guy. That's what Joe Flacco always was. He was never the replacement for Deshaun Watson.
No, he was never going to be the guy next year. No, you're completely right about that. Now, just because you throw back-to-back pick sixes, I mean, I know how bad those are, and I know that that's when the game got out of hand. But that doesn't erase what Joe Flacco did to get this team to the playoffs. It doesn't erase 13 touchdowns and 1,616 yards in his 5 starts. It doesn't erase the belief he put in that team that they could go somewhere once they get to the playoffs and then go somewhere once they got to the playoffs. It doesn't erase the impact he had in the locker room. None of that goes away just because he threw 2 pick sixes, one of which he had a guy hanging on his waist. So, yeah, he was never going to be the guy, right? Deshaun Watson, they're paying Deshaun Watson a ton of money. Joe Flacco is going to turn 39 tomorrow. That doesn't mean Joe Flacco didn't prove that he belongs in the league. Doesn't mean there isn't a chance he could come back. I talked to a bunch of guys yesterday that think he would be good for Deshaun Watson, and they'd be good together. And that Flacco did fit in fit in great, and had a positive impact in the locker room. Joe Bitonio called him a glue guy. So, I think you have to be careful, and I'm going to harp on this point all day, Dave. You got to be careful about reading too much into 2 throws, right? The guy made 300 throws with the Browns, and I know he's intercepted 10 times. There are a bunch of good stuff there, and, big picture, yes, it's Deshaun Watson, and he's going to have to be your guy. But Joe Flacco has a place in this league, and he might have a place on this team, and you can do a lot worse than asking Joe Flacco to start a playoff game.
Yeah, and again, the pick sixes, you got to take it in context. Pick sixes are never good. He had a lot of turnovers all year. I'll give you that. But I think Kevin Stefanski, I think Joe Flacco realized we're going to have to score some points. And so he forced it in a thing where he probably, split-second decision. Man, we need points. I'm gonna try to fit it in or get it over there. And it cost him.
Yeah, I mean, he's trying to throw the first one away, right? So the thought process there is correct, except he couldn't get enough on the throw. Now, that's his fault. I mean, you can't take that away as a quarterback. He should have taken a sack, right? But it also makes sense when you listen to him say, we'd already overcome a 2nd and long, I think it was 2nd and 16. He goes, I don't want to put us in that situation again, so I didn't want to take another sack. We need points on this drive. He just needed to get more on it, or try to throw to maybe Njoku, throw to Njoku's feet. He probably could have gotten it there and saved that down, and he knows it. And then the second, it's 4th and 2, the second pick six. You got to make a throw there in the tight coverage. He tries to force one to Bryant, or tries to get one into Bryant. The linebacker makes a really good play. It's a tough spot to be in. One that in a normal game where you're not down a ton, you punt there, or maybe you run it up the middle. So yeah, they're bad plays, but I don't think they define him, and I think there's explanations for both of them.
The other thing that came out when Kevin Stefanski talked about, and I know you wrote an article about it, just about Deshaun Watson and him being ready. Take us through that, what you found, and just what Kevin had to say about that.
Yeah, so I talked to Watson as part of a small group in December, right before Christmas Eve, before the Houston game. He had an event, and he said, the shoulder's progressing. He wasn't ready to throw. He was still in a sling at the time. Now he's out of the sling. But he said everything was going well in the rehab from the broken shoulder. Watson didn't talk yesterday, so it was on Stefanski. And Stefanski said he's on schedule, if not ahead of schedule. Expects him to be rolling, in the offseason. Expects him to be ready to roll in the spring. And, whether that's at the start of the offseason program or OTAs or minicamp, at some point he expects him to be back on the field and throwing in part of practice for the Browns. It's scary, right? It's a broken bone in your throwing shoulder. We need to see how he recovers from that. It's not a common injury for a quarterback in the league. So I understand there's doubts there. But Stefanski was almost overboard confident in Watson's ability to come back from this. And, he in fact said, I think he'll hit the ground, or I asked him, do you think he can hit the ground running, right? It's been so start and stop with Watson in his 2 years here. Now he's had this. When he comes back, do you think he can hit the ground running and it's not going to be a huge adjustment again? And he said no doubt. And he went to the 4-1 record in games that he started and finished. He went to the second half of that Baltimore game, which he played with the broken bone in the shoulder and a high ankle sprain, as proof that Watson is ready to kind of take off and that the Browns can win with him as their quarterback.
So along those lines, Kevin Stefanski was asked how different the offense will look with Deshaun Watson, as well as the idea that Joe Flacco is more his style of quarterback.
I don't get caught up in style. We concern ourselves with winning football. And I think you saw multiple quarterbacks, and I say that with PJ going in there and Dorian going in there, and it's our job as coaches to adjust to the players and the skill sets of the players and the playing style of the players. So that's what I think we have to do as coaches, but we're concerned with winning.
Your offense.
Yeah.
We're trying to figure out what it's going to look like when you and Watson have extended time to perform.
Well, I guess I would go back to there was some really good moments this season. It's such a small sample size with Deshaun, and you had a weather game in there. So I think we all know what he's capable of. We're excited about the future.
Scott, I know fans don't want to hear it. They still got to figure out what works best. But you should feel pretty good. This guy won, like we said, he won with P.J. Walker, he won with DTR, he won with Joe. He's got a good enough feel for offense. He's going to figure out how to maximize Deshaun Watson. And there's a lot to maximize there.
There is. I mean, let's assume that Deshaun Watson is still the same guy he was in Houston, right? That he's still physically able to do everything he was there. And if he comes back from the shoulder, I think he still is. He's still young enough to run. We saw that this year. I do think I think it's safe to say Stefanski is, if not more comfortable, at least more familiar running the offense that they ran with Flacco, right? He ran it with Keenum in Minnesota. He ran it with Baker Mayfield. He ran it with Jacoby Brissett. It's a lot of under center, play action, bootleg stuff for the quarterback. And that's fine. But we also know that Stefanski, when the Browns went and got Deshaun Watson, knew he would have to adjust and tweak the offense from 2022 to 2023. More RPOs, more shotgun, more zone reads, more quarterback runs for Watson to make Watson more comfortable. And I think you'll just continue to see an evolution. Now, can you mix in maybe some of that under center stuff to just an added level to the offense, an added layer? Maybe maybe you can mix that in too. But I do think Stefanski. I believe him completely when he says it's up to him to adjust to the style of his guys. He did it no matter who was playing quarterback. I think the game plans were good when he had Deshaun Watson in there. We saw some really good moments, not enough of them because Watson wasn't out there a ton. But I think Stefanski is certainly capable of having a winning quality offense with any of those guys or with any of those styles of play and of quarterback.
When you look at this roster in moving forward and trying to get the most out of Deshaun Watson, what area do you think what do they have to do? What do you need offensively to unlock what Deshaun Watson can be, do you think?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. When things go well, like when things went well, right? They scored 33 against Baltimore. And I know 7 of those or 6 of those were on a pick six, but that happens in the league. They threw the ball to David Njoku. They threw the ball to Amari Cooper. They ran it well. If you have guys around Deshaun Watson, I think you can have success. And here's what I think. Deshaun Watson needs to do a better job getting the ball to David Njoku. And we saw that from Joe Flacco. He unlocked him a little bit. I mean, there were moments early in the season, but really toward the end is when Njoku came on. Part of that was an attitude adjustment for Njoku. But a lot of it was Flacco finding him and getting the ball in space where he could take off and run. I think that's a big priority for Watson. Now, does he need another receiver maybe to help his game? I think it's fair to say that. I would also say that this group that they had offensively, they were able to score. Like when things were going well, they scored. And it didn't really matter who was out there, right? Like Joe Flacco threw to 8 guys, 9 guys. So it feels like they have pieces. Now, those pieces could certainly be better. It's just, I think, more time on task for Watson and more consistency and staying on the field.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm with you, though. I think if you give him another receiver and make sure Amari Cooper's back and find a way to do that, I think that opens him up even a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. And you want to support him, right? And they did that last offseason. They went out and they got Elijah Moore. And they signed Marquise Goodwin. And, they drafted Cedric Tillman. And obviously those guys had differing degrees of success and ability to stay on the field. But the effort was there. They signed Jordan Akins, a guy that Watson had played with. The effort was there. to support Deshaun Watson. And I think the same philosophy will be had this offseason. And I think it makes all the sense in the world because all the things that Deshaun Watson's gone through, just from a football perspective, right, in the ups, the starts and stops, and the injuries this year, you need him to get confident. You need him to get comfortable. You need him to get off to a strong start. And if you surround him with as much offensive weaponry as possible, that can only help, right? So if you add another guy to that mix of Cooper and Moore and a Tillman in year 2 and David Njoku, who's, seems like he's broken through, like that feels like the best way to help Watson maximize his ability.
Scott Petrick and I are going to step aside, take another time out. Other side of the break, we'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason, talk a little bit about have the Browns built a winning culture. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrick from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as BrownZone.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Good morning. Well, the Browns went as far as they possibly could with all those injuries they had on the offensive line with the 2 tackles as well as DeJuan Jones, which would have really, really helped, would have kept the pressure off of Flacco. And the defensive line, this time they didn't get any pressure on anybody, which was really a shame. The defensive backfield was riddled with injuries. We went as far as we could. Flacco did a wonderful job, but we went as far as we could with injuries, and that's part of the game. Have a good day, sir. Thank you.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Scott, we talked about it a little bit. The tackles struggled, and Joe Flacco had a lot of pressure. It was really the first time where it was like, And you know what? Credit the Texans. They got after it and just they outplayed the Browns.
Yeah, first of all, that gentleman leaves me voicemails at work, and I appreciate it. I never get back to him, but I appreciate the voicemails. He's probably right that this was as far as they were kind of meant to go. Now, that doesn't mean they could have gone down to Houston and won, right? They were 2 or 3 point favorites. I thought they were going to win. I think they're more talented than the Texans. So I don't want to use it to say, that was as far as they could go. Having said that, it is impressive that they got to the point they did. They overcame so many injuries we've talked about so many times. But things caught up to them. And I think you're exactly right, Dave, about those tackle spots. It's really hard when you don't have 1, 2, and 3. And you can only do so much, right? David Njoku and the running backs chipped a ton. And that limits what you can do as an offense, what you can do as a play caller. You got to get more guys out in space. And when they tried to do it and they trusted those tackles, they didn't always handle their job on Saturday, and it caught up to them.
Without question. So the question is, have the Browns kind of turned that culture around? Joe Bitonio, about the culture that now exists, at least what he believes in that Browns locker room.
I think Coach Stefanski's built a culture here. It's a resilient. We talk about smart, tough, accountable, resilient team. He probably says that every day, and that's something we focus on. And I think he's built that, and I think Andrew Berry's built that with the guys he's brought in, the people he's brought in, revamping the D-line this year with the guys that he brought in, I think tremendously changed the culture on that side of the ball and for the team. But I do think we've built something, and like I said, I hope it's the start of, hey, this is what we do. This is a minimum. You go to the playoffs every year, and hopefully there's more to come from that. Yeah, I think you keep the structure here, obviously, Andrew Berry, Coach Stefanski. And I think the main core of guys is going to be back, and I think those guys carry on the culture. But I think we learned, what it takes to be resilient, and obviously, like you said, each year is different, but I think the main core is going to be back, and the main core can carry that over and be like, hey, this is what we went through, hopefully we don't have to go through anything like that again, but this is what we went through last year. we had 11 wins. We made the playoffs.
Scott, I know you wrote an article before the game just about the way this the team and the guys felt about it. Take us through that.
Yeah, it's interesting because Kevin Stefanski, and I think I asked Paul DePodesta this once too, like they don't really believe in culture, like that, the word culture. Stefanski said a million times, it's about the people. So there was a huge emphasis in last year's offseason to go get the people that would make this locker room better, make the chemistry better. Stefanski might not like it, but make the culture better. There was a concerted effort because they saw a deficiency there in 2022. They go out and get guys like Dalvin Tomlinson and Shelby Harris and Maurice Hurst II and Rodney McLeod and Juan Thornhill and a number of guys that they thought would have a positive impact, joining guys like Bitonio and Anthony Walker Jr. and Myles Garrett, guys already here that they felt were, in place and had the right attitude, the right demeanor, the right work ethic. So it's just a matter of keeping that together. But they figured out ways to cultivate that as well, right? The trip to the Greenbrier. Guys rolled their eyes at that, right? Players. And then they went, and now I can't tell you how many times during the course of the year guys pointed to Greenbrier, to that trip, as like a really seminal moment in this team coming together. And then it continued, and it was guys going out to dinner, guys supporting each other during the bye week. I wrote a story back then about guys traveling to New York for Obo Okoronkwo had a photography exhibit, and guys flew to New York during the bye week to go see it, which they obviously don't have to do, but it's a sign of how close they'd become. And that closeness led to better communication on the field, better play on the field. This is them saying that. And you would expect that to continue. Now, you got to be careful with it, and you can't ignore it. And next year there's going to be a lot of new guys, but I agree with Bitonio that if you have the right foundation, then guys who come in have to adjust, right? They have to adjust to the foundation that is here, as opposed to coming in and undermining anything or not knowing how to react. They'll be taught how to do all those pieces that led the team to be as resilient as it was this season.
Yeah, and I would imagine Andrew Berry kind of looks for similar kind of guys again. That'll be something that becomes important in free agency because they had success with it. All right, before we go to break, let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
I knew it was going to be a long day as soon as they didn't call that pass interference when Njoku was wide open and the guy got there 2.5 seconds early and no call. Refs took that game over, brother. I love you, man. Be good, be safe.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. There were a couple of bad calls, but the game got away from them in that third quarter. And I don't think the refs, they could have had every call, and it still was going to be a struggle.
Yeah, I mean, you get beat 45-14. I don't think you can complain about the officiating. And it was a bad call. I mean,
it was horrible.
Had a good view of it from the press box live. You could tell he got there early.
Yep.
It's a bad call. And, throwing the butterfly effect, who knows what would have happened. But I don't think that was a game-defining play. I think I've said it on here before. I think we talk about officiating too much. But for those people who do want to criticize the officials, I went back and I watched most of the game again today. Laramie Tunsil, the left tackle, felt like he was like fading back before not every snap, but a lot of snaps. And they called Myles Garrett for offsides one time, and you could see Tunsil move his left foot. So, I think they probably needed to do a better job of that. I, again, don't think that changes the game, but that stood out to me.
Yeah, I thought that, but I always think that. It always seems like the guys that are going against Myles Garrett, they give him like a half a step head start. It's like...
Yeah, I think you see that across the league, and James Hudson seemed to do it for the Browns. And I think part of that is the league says that's the only way these guys have any chance. We can't have the quarterbacks getting killed every snap. So I think they give him a little break. But it just felt different to me. It felt like he had this momentum moving that really, I'm sure he does it and it works to his advantage, but it felt more noticeable to me Saturday.
Scott Patrick and I are going to step aside, take one more time out on the side of the break. Back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE. I'll be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrak from the Elyria Chronicle Telegram as well as brownzone.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, Dave. Great show. Howard from Marin County. I'm shell-shocked from what I just saw. So a couple points. I think the defense is terrible against great quarterbacks, and CJ is a great quarterback. Miles was missing in action. I think Jim Schwartz's stock has crashed, and I doubt he's going to get a head coaching job. The offensive line needs a complete redo, and the Browns are old. When you think about it, the O-line's old, Cooper's old, the defensive line acquisitions are old. I think the Browns lost the trade to Houston for Deshaun Watson. They definitely need better drafts, and I think the Super Bowl window has closed. I think Houston is the future. I think they will compete against Kansas City and Baltimore or other teams to win. So that's the wrap-up from here. Great show. Wait till next year. Take care. Bye.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Scott, I understand it. I disagree with that. I would ask you, has Dan Quinn's stock crashed? I mean, the Cowboys looked just as bad, if not worse, defensively, and Dan Quinn's going to be interviewing for every head coaching opening that's out there. Jim Schwartz wasn't going to get a whole lot of coaching interviews for head coaching. He may still get one or two, but he's not the new, young, shiny coordinator that everybody wants to hire, and he's not Bill Belichick or Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, that's a pretty bleak view that that caller had there. Jim Schwartz, I mean, he had a great year, and he's a big-time defensive coordinator. The Browns are thrilled to have him. First of all, it's not fair, like I've said a million times, to just base it on one game. You're right, Dan Quinn is a perfect example of that. Now, Dan Quinn, I don't know if he's younger than Schwartz. Schwartz is only like 57 or 58, but I think Quinn's younger. Quinn also went to a Super Bowl and probably should have won that Super Bowl as a head coach in Atlanta. Right, Schwartz went to one playoff appearance during his head coaching tenure in Detroit. So I think Quinn's got a better resume. You know, he's been in Dallas. They've won a bunch in Dallas. So I think that's this discrepancy there. I never really expected Schwartz to get a bunch of calls to be a head coach because you're right, he's not the new young thing, and that's where a lot of these go. But I don't think that changed because of Saturday. I mean, there was a whole week where guys were interviewing around the league, and you did not hear his name come up at all. I think that's interesting. And, he points to the offensive line. We talked about the tackles, right? Like, I think the three interior guys, they're really good. And, Joe Bitonio's getting old of that group. He's 32, I want to say. Beat up this year, but he's still playing at a really high level. Why Teller's still young enough. Either Posick is still young enough. So if you get those tackles back, and Jed Wills is young, and DeJuan Jones was a rookie this year. So there needs to be, they're going to have to figure out the defensive line because there's a lot of free agents. Some of those guys are getting older, certainly. But, I don't feel like this team, I don't think the Super Bowl window's closed. I think as long as Deshaun Watson plays, if he plays well, the Super Bowl window's open, or whoever plays quarterback. And one last thing. Yes, Houston looks like they're going to be good. D'Amico Ryans is a really likable guy. He's done a great job as a rookie coach. Same thing with C.J. Stroud. But people thought Jacksonville was the hot thing last year, right? And they fell apart this year. So this league is so volatile that I hate to, after one season, really make judgments on teams or people.
Yeah, relative to the Browns being old, a lot of that experience and the age came from the one-year contracts. They're gonna go out and do that again if they can, because that's what teams that think they're in the Super Bowl window do. But again, I would just let's see what they do relative to the roster in the offseason. Along those lines, offseason every eliminated team an offseason move that they should make, a guide. So big predictions. This is from ESPN.com. Big prediction for the offseason for the Browns. Despite question about his return from knee injury, Browns will sign Nick Chubb to an extension which will allow them to keep him past 2024, also lowering his cap number to help the Browns get under their number. The national narrative is that the Browns are in salary cap. They're not in those issues. They've done a pretty good job of handling that. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they sign Nick Chubb, extend him out, and add years to it. I know you've also written about Kareem Hunt. Let's kind of combine the running back position there.
Yeah, the extension for Chubb is really the only thing that makes sense, assuming he can play again, right? And obviously he's working toward that, and we see him around the building because it's a big cap number. It's like $14 million next year. That's a lot to pay a guy that probably won't be there all season, coming off that knee injury. It makes sense for them to work something out, lower the cap number, maybe make it back end heavy. That if he returns to the Nick Chubb that he gets all that money, or he make it incentive late and early. I mean, I think they'll figure that out. With Kareem Hunt, I mean, he's an interesting case study because he had a huge impact on this team, and Kevin Stefanski said it yesterday. Just that he provided huge value. I mean, he scored 11 touchdowns if you include the playoffs. Like, that's really hard to do. It's hard to get in the end zone that much. Yet he only averaged 3 yards a carry. Now, some of that's because it's short yardage at goal line, but he doesn't have the same explosion he did, 5-6 years ago. So he sounded yesterday. I talked to him for a while. He sounded like a guy that was not going to come back. He said he's definitely going to test the market. Didn't rule out coming back, but it felt like this was an unexpected reunion that worked out great for both sides. So I don't expect him to be here, so you have Chubb, you have Jerome Ford, you have Pierre Strong Jr. You probably have to add one more guy to the mix, a younger guy that can maybe challenge Jerome Ford for that starting job until Nick Chubb gets back to health.
Scott Petrak, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Scott.
Thanks, Dave.
Scott Petrak, make sure you check him out. Always really good Browns coverage. Elyria Chronicle Telegram. You can check him out on the web at brownzone.com. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Casey Kinnaman straight ahead. We continue talking Browns. Stay with us.
Come back to Go Forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Holiday gold! The $20 scratch-off?
It has 100 times multiplier. I could win $1 million.
Psych! I got merry and bright.
No fair.
It has a 200 times multiplier. I could win $2 million.
Game on the back.
Game on the back. Game on the back! Game on the back! Game on the back! Game on the back!
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams, I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
For CLE, let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey guys, this is absolute embarrassment. This team was totally unready for this game. I gave Kevin Stefanski his credit for getting them here. This is what happens when he's in a game against somebody, a good coach. he has no clue. Him and Jim Schwartz both. You have no clue what to do here. And I don't know. I'll listen for comments. But this is so disappointing, and I knew this was going to happen. All right, bye.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's welcome in Casey Kinnaman, Dog Pound Daily Network 216. Casey, I disagree. I understand they didn't play well. I was very disappointed with the defense. They didn't get any pressure at all on C.J. Stroud. That's kind of the biggest disappointment, the way the secondary played, and no pressure on C.J. Stroud.
Yeah, it was embarrassing. It was an embarrassing end to what I consider a very successful season. Unceremoniously getting bounced out of the first round the way that you did. There's no other way to explain. You can characterize that other than embarrassing. But I can't get with the whole Stefanski has no clue. And even threw Schwartz in there, it was disappointing. But it doesn't outweigh everything that I saw all year long. I can't allow that one game to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say these guys can't get it done. They didn't get it done in the last game. That is a fact. There's nothing. Hopefully, they have to learn from that. That's what has to happen now for them to move forward and be the team that I believe they can be. And it has to be a growing experience. I go back to the 1997 Denver Broncos. They got bounced out in the first round against Jacksonville. They were a very talented team. That fueled them, and they came back, and the next two seasons were on a tear. And I think that you can see that happen to teams. You can see teams learn from an experience about preparation, how to have your mentality. And I do think the Houston Texans deserve credit. They definitely had the Browns schemed up and took full advantage of it.
So Kevin Stefanski was asked yesterday if he thought both Deshaun Watson and Joe Flacco could be on the Browns next season.
Yeah, I'd leave all those things up to, obviously, Andrew in this offseason. I will say this about Joe. Joe was awesome for this football team. He did a great job, battled like crazy. I know he enjoyed it. We obviously wish yesterday's outcome was different. But, I have a ton of respect for Joe and what he was able to do.
You'd like to come back?
I think Joe is going to work through everything this offseason, as you can imagine. But had a great meeting with Joe, really all these guys. He's grateful for the opportunity, and he'll work through this offseason and see where it lands.
He's a starting quarterback in the NFL still?
He's obviously, as you guys saw, he's talented. He won football games for us. We had multiple guys that have won football games for us, so I believe in all these guys.
Casey, I could see somebody having him as a bridge quarterback. There are so many quarterback needy teams. I could see somebody having a young guy that they think might take a little bit and bringing Joe Flacco in to start the year.
Yeah, you take a look around the league and you see how the depth of quarterback was bare this year. I'm not throwing shade at people, but Easton Stick and Bailey Zappi are out there getting reps. The Jets played Tim Boyle before they called Joe. I think he showed he had enough in the tank. And then if a team was in that position where they needed a veteran to kind of guide the boat for a little while, I think Joe Flacco would be a prime candidate.
So this is from NFL.com. One question for each eliminated playoff team. For the Browns, will Deshaun Watson deliver for this team? Joe Flacco looked incredibly comfortable running the offense for Kevin Stefanski. Limited experience, while Watson has rarely found a rhythm to indicate he's trending back towards a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback. We all know the Browns can't afford to give up on Watson at this stage. What's worth questioning is if he really can take this offense to the heights that Flacco attained so easily. I think the question is, what will the offense look like with Joe Flacco? It's going to be drastically different. With Deshaun Watson. It's not going to look the same, nor should it look the same. They have different skill sets. I said this earlier in this show. Joe Flacco was about not wasting a year of Amari Cooper and some of the Myles Garrett. And he gave you a chance to win now. It wasn't about, do we keep him long term?
Yeah, it's a completely different equation here. And people forget, the last time we saw Deshaun Watson, the light had came on. You beat the best team in the league at their place. It just looked different. It didn't look the same as when Flacco played. There was an explosivity to the offense and a verticality to the offense, but it was more high risk, high reward with Flacco as well. The Deshaun offense was different. It was more predicated on the running game, and that running game wasn't even there when Flacco got there. The team had to pivot and make moves. But for Deshaun Watson, all the eggs are in that basket. This is the $230 million question. the thing is, even though we saw the light kind of come on, and he was 4-1. People keep giving him that Indy game. I can't do it. I'll say 4-1. And 2 of those games were blowouts. The team was winning. The team was doing what the team needed to do with him under center. It just didn't look the way people wanted it to look. But we don't know what's going to happen when he comes back from a shoulder injury. We don't know what that's going to look like. And I know the word that no one wants to hear is rust. That's what we don't know. How's that going to look when he comes back from the shoulder injury? Is he going to be able to compete right away and do all the things he needs to do? Will he have to adapt and change his game to avoid getting injured? Because that's been the biggest concern for me is he can't stay healthy. And does he have to adapt to be able to stay healthy and stay on the field? These are all the unknowns. But all the eggs are in that basket, so we're going to find out come next year one way or the other.
Yeah, and again, there's $230 million riding on the Browns finding the right answers to those questions without a doubt. All right, Joe Marino, Kyle Krabs from the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast. Where Joe Flacco may end up next year?
One of the big things in my mind lately has been, well, what does 2024 look like for Joe Flacco? And I don't know. I started thinking to myself, well, should he have a shot at being the Browns starter? And maybe that's not what you want because you obviously have a lot invested in Deshaun Watson. But do you think there's a bridge opportunity for him? Does a team like Atlanta look at him, the New England Patriots? These are the I don't know. I wouldn't say the Titans, but teams like that are kind of in limbo with their quarterback. I don't know, Washington. Does he get a real shot like that? Is he somebody's backup, or is he going to sign somewhere in the middle of the season?
I don't think he's going to have to wait till November. That's all I'll give you.
Fair enough, but Can you go into a season at this point in time?
No, I wouldn't give Joe Flacco a starting job.
The Raiders. I don't know.
I wouldn't give him a starting job.
Casey, here's just my thought on it. Somebody that takes a quarter. You're not going to get, not all the teams that need quarterbacks are going to get one of the first 4 guys. Somebody that's developmental, you sign Joe Flacco, you start the year with Joe Flacco, and you tell him, help this kid out and figure out the offense. And Joe Flacco will be really good at that.
Yeah, that's a massive part of it is, do you have a guy in place or are you in that bridge situation? But all those teams they just mentioned do not have head coaches. So the head coach that comes in there determines a lot. Some of those guys don't want to play young guys. Their life's on the line as a coach when you come to a new place to get off on the right foot and to have a veteran that you can hand the ball to, like that puts them at ease. That kind of like eases the situation and you can allow a guy to develop. But at bare minimum, what keeps him out of Cleveland is some team could offer him the chance to compete for a starting job. Like the Browns could say that, but it'd be lip service. Like their starting job's paid for. They have a guy. So he's not going to have that true opportunity. And at Flacco's stage in his career, I'm sure that's what he wants. He doesn't have to have something handed to him, but he needs that opportunity to go in and compete for a starting job. And at the very end, Joe Marino slipped in a team, the Raiders. I could see it. That feels right to me. That feels like a move the Raiders have historically done. Go get that old gunslinger, that guy who can throw a good deep ball. It just seems like a good fit for the Raiders to me.
Yeah, especially if they get a younger guy that's Aiden O'Connell. Heck, that's another guy that just needs some time to develop. Casey Kinnaman and I are going to step aside, take one more time out on the other side of the break. We'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Look a little bit ahead at what the Browns might be doing coming up. Sports4CLE, we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Holiday gold! The $20 scratch-off?
It has 100 times multiplier. I could win $1 million.
Psych! I got merry and bright.
No fair.
It has a 200 times multiplier. I could win $2 million.
Game on the back.
Game on the back.
Game on the back!
Game on the back! Game on the back! Game on the back!
We continue talking Browns with Casey Kinnaman from Dog Pound Daily Network 216. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, this is Rico. Right now this really hurts. I know that it was an amazing season considering all the major significant injuries they dealt with, but nothing is guaranteed. You have to take advantage of the playoffs once you get in there. You know, the next step for this organization is to consistently make the playoffs, not once every 3 years or once every 18 years, but consistently, year in and year out. We have our franchise quarterback in place, Deshaun Watson, and he will lead us to the promised land. Once Nick Chubb comes back, Watson's ready to go, this Browns team will be a contender. Thanks. Go Browns.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Casey, I think he's spot on. It needs to be, instead of once every 3 years, it needs to be 4 out of every 5 years or every 5 years.
Yeah, Rico's 100% right. That's the bar. That has to be the bar, the expectation. The thing is, every season's different. You know, the progression's not always linear. But we saw what happened this year where they were able to overcome through all their injuries and still keep the thing on track. To me, that's the expectation. You know, you have to be there. And you look around our division, there are teams that already have that. That even when they're not good, they're not bad because their floor is raised. That's just where they have their organization. The Browns have to join that. That's where they need to be as well, and be one of those teams that are perennial in the playoffs. Because if you can't punch your ticket, you can't win the dance. You know, so that's what it comes down to. Is these guys need to raise their game and raise the standard. And I think they've built a foundation. Now it's just time to build upon that.
So when you look at this roster, who are guys that the Browns have to extend, get back, and keep in the fold to continue moving forward?
I look at the skill positions on offense. I look at running back, and I'm looking at wide receiver. You know, I do believe that if Chubb comes back from this injury, that's someone you extend. I also think Amari Cooper's a massive candidate. He has a huge salary cap hit next year. I think you extend him 2 years, convert that into a signing bonus, and really work on that wide receiver room. To me, that's where you can do the most work. You need to add another running back as well, because even if Chubb gets off to a good start, just given what he's went through, you know, and if anybody can come back from this injury, I think it needs to be said, it would be Nick Chubb. But we're not guaranteed, and he's not guaranteed to get back 100%. You need to add another running back. I don't want to have to lean on Jerome Ford to be the starter in case Chubb can't go. But that wide receiver room needs work. I think you need to add another quality starter to go alongside Amari Cooper and continue to develop these other guys. Continue to develop Cedric Tillman. See what Michael Woods looks like when he gets back. Let Moore's contract play out and see what he's able to accomplish. But I think that you need to do work in those two rooms specifically.
And if you think about it, those will unlock the potential of Deshaun Watson, who and it seems like Andrew Berry was along those lines. You know, they went out and they got more. He seems to be operating on that wavelength.
Yeah, and one thing that they haven't done is they haven't used one of their higher picks to get a receiver. They keep falling in that third, fourth round range. But if you look this last few years, the second round, there's been just studs. You know, you got Jefferson, you got A.J. Brown, Deebo Samuel. These guys were all second-round picks. Take your swing on one of those guys. Try to get one of those players because they're going to be there. The receiver is such a deep position coming out of college. There's always a first-round talent that slides to the second round, sometimes third. You know, I think they need to take a swing at that and try to retain that kind of talent because that's what you need to do in these next few years while Cooper starts to age out.
So free agency, we'll have plenty of time to talk about. Is there a big name that you think fits with this roster, with this scheme, with this style?
Yeah, I keep seeing everybody kind of default to T. Higgins, which he's a phenomenal talent. I see either Cincinnati franchising him or him just going to the highest bidder. And I don't think the Browns and Andrew Berry are ever going to be that highest bidder team. I think they'll make a bid, but I don't think they're going to be someone who just unloads the bank for a skill player. What I see, the player that I would look at, and he's under contract currently. He's going into his 5th year with San Francisco. That's Brandon Ayuk. If they're unable to get a contract figured out this summer, I'm making that call. I'm trying to get that guy out of San Francisco. He provides the exact skill set that you need. He's a slasher. He's a deep threat and a natural separator. And that would give you another dynamic weapon to place along Amari Cooper, and he's young. You can build with that and kind of let him take over that wide receiver one here in a couple of years.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like that thought. Let me ask you this. What do you think of, and I've seen this in a couple of places, and I like the thought of it, Austin Eckler from the San Diego and Los Angeles Chargers?
Yeah, because he gives you a different skill set than what Chubb does. You know, Chubb's more of that between the tackles, you know, just pure running back. Eckler gives you a dynamic ability in the passing game to be dangerous. And he can handle the running duties as well, but he would give you an extra facet that you currently don't have in that room that provides danger. Now, we did see Jerome Ford take a step this year as a receiving back, but I don't think that would be a full-time gig for him. Where someone like Eckler, I think you could definitely rely on him in that way.
Casey Kinnaman, Dog Pound Daily Network 216, as always. Great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Casey.
Anytime, guys. Thanks for having me.
Casey Kinnaman, make sure you check him out. Dog Pound Daily and Network 216, always really good Brown stuff. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.